The Transportation Safety Board of Canada has released its investigation report into a fatal occurrence that took place at Canadian National Railway's Melville Yard facility in Saskatchewan in 2017. TSB Senior Rail Investigator Glenn Pilot and I will explain what happened, what the TSB learned, and what needs to be done to prevent similar accidents from happening again. On the evening of December 22, 2017, a CN employee was fatally injured while performing switching operations at the company's rail yard in Melville, Saskatchewan. After an attempt to move or kick a group of 3 loaded hopper cars up a short ascending grade with insufficient speed, the cars lost momentum and began rolling back downhill uncontrolled. The employee ran toward them, climbed on the lead car, and attempted to apply the handbrake. The cars did not stop or slow down, but continued to roll back down the track, colliding corner to corner with another group of cars and pinning the employee between them. Along with today's release of the investigation report, the board is also issuing a recommendation and a safety concern, aimed respectively at reducing the risk of similar uncontrolled movements during switching operations in yards, and ensuring that inexperienced employees are not paired in higher risk operations. I'll talk more about both of these issues in a few minutes, but first I'll let the investigator in charge, Mr. Glenn Pilot, walk you through the details and explain how and why an otherwise routine shift turns so deadly.
A rail yard is a big, busy place. Operating 24 hours a day, its purpose is to take incoming trains, reorganize the individual cars, and create new departing trains. On the evening of the occurrence, 2 CN employees were working together as a team using a system that allowed them to remotely operate locomotives without the need for a locomotive engineer. According to the collective agreement negotiated between CN and the union, the employee with the most seniority in the crew becomes the designated foreman and the other person the designated helper. The foreman that night was a senior employee, but not by much. In fact, both employees were relatively inexperienced and wore green vests to indicate less than 2 years of service. The helper was one of the employees with the least seniority at the yard, and this was just the foreman's 5th shift in the role of foreman at Melville Yard using the remote control system. Prior to that, she had mainly acted as helper when in the yard. A normal way to move cars is to kick them. In this case, that meant giving the cars a brief shove with a remote control locomotive, then letting them roll the rest of the way on their own. Kicking cars is generally thought to be the most efficient way of moving cars around a yard. However, without enough speed, cars kicked up a hill can stall and start to roll down again. That evening, the foreman used a remote control locomotive to kick the cut of 3 cars up the ascending grade, but misjudged the speed required. Halfway there, the car stalled and began to roll back down, uncontrolled, towards her and the other cut of cars. Recognizing this, the foreman ran towards the moving cars, and after climbing onto the lead car, attempted to apply the handbrake, but the cars didn't stop. All of this happened quickly. TSB reenactment testing done after the accident identified that with no handbrake applied, it took 22 to 30 seconds for the cars to travel to the point of impact after they began to roll back. The testing demonstrated that the foreman would have had enough time to react, run, climb on board the cars, and apply the handbrake. However, when the foreman applied the handbrake, the weld securing the bell crank bracket to the car failed and the bell crank and bracket separated from the car, rendering the handbrake ineffective. Because the handbrake was compromised, the uncontrolled movement did not slow or stop, which reduced the opportunity and time for the foreman to safely egress before the collision. Safe rail operations requires that employees working together have a shared understanding of the task and a shared expectation of how it will be performed. In other words, teamwork is critical. But in this occurrence, the foreman and the helper were working in virtual isolation. No plan was discussed for kicking the cars uphill, nor was there any shared expectation of how this would be performed. Since the accident, CN has made changes to the track configuration at Melville Yard and prohibited the kicking of cars uphill. CN also identified 857 similar open-top hopper cars in its rail car fleet and inspected them all, particularly in the area of the bell crank bracket to ensure safe operation. The inspection identified 52 various defects, 5 of which were belt crank brackets that could potentially affect the safe operation of handbrakes. But more still needs to be done, because the issues that TSB identified go beyond a single rail yard, crew pairing, or railway company.
The board has previously expressed concern that the current defenses are not sufficient to reduce the number of uncontrolled movements and improve safety. In fact, from 2009 to 2018, uncontrolled movements involving switching without using air brakes on the cars, and which allows them to move freely, have been on an upward trend. In 2009, there were 14. In 2018, there were 27. So it's time for concrete action, in this case, a comprehensive strategy. Therefore, the board recommends that Transport Canada work with both the railway industry and its labor representatives to identify the underlying causes of uncontrolled movements that occur while switching without air, and develop and implement strategies and/or regulatory requirements to reduce their frequency. The second major issue I want to address today is crew experience, particularly the practice of pairing newer employees together. As extensive employee turnover has been occurring in the railway industry in the past few years, it is not unusual for the two most junior and least experienced employees at a terminal to be working together in a yard, particularly during the evening and night shifts. Railway companies are aware that so-called green-on-green pairings of less experienced personnel can be a risk. In this occurrence, although the foreman and the helper were both qualified for their positions, that's not the same thing as having experience doing the job. Ideally, the solution is to pair a new employee with one who has more seniority to help pass along knowledge and experience. The board is concerned that without additional mitigation, inexperienced personnel will continue to be paired together in yards with a commensurate risk of ongoing adverse outcomes. Working in rail yards comes with certain inherent risks. Reducing and mitigating those risks will require a sustained and collaborative effort by Transport Canada as the regulator, the railway companies, and their labor representatives. Doing so will lead to greater safety for all employees, no matter what work they do or how long they've been employed. Thank you.